All right, I'm going to get the book because um,
Yeah.
this book is the cause of so many fucking problems. I actually don't like this book at all. The Laws of Scientific Handreading. I really, really have a big problem with the Laws of Scientific Handreading. And the reason I have a big problem with the Laws of Scientific Handreading is quite simply this: is that basically what you've got there is you've got apparently very extensive volume, which is neither a description of laws and nor is it scientific. So it's kind of both of those things that are completely wrong. But what Benham does is he basically takes the idea of ideas of people like Dupont-Aigny. So if you look at the handshake classifications of Dupont-Aigny, he says, "Oh well, there's the philosophic and the conic and the elementary and the square," and his system of handshake classification is actually based upon the fingertip shapes and the knottiness of the joints. It's not based upon the structure of the hand. So it's this combination of things like how are they knotty? If they're knotty, it's a philosophic hand. If it's smooth, it's the intuitive hand. And then he looks at the tip shapes as well and says spatula and square. And so he kind of derives his whole hand shape classification from that. So Benham borrows from those ideas, and he's got this whole chapter in here on fingertips. And I promise you, I mean, this is the first book that I bought, on hand reading. So I studied it. Like this is one of my, I studied it page after page. And he's got this whole chapter on fingertips and the importance of the fingertips.
Yeah.
And he makes a huge song and dance about it. But even in the examples they got, they're not that distinct. They're not that distinctive. And occasionally you do find some pointed fingertips. I'm not saying you never find
Yeah.
them, but
Yeah.
you don't find them often enough. Maybe things were differentiated in the 19th century in a way that they're not now. That's possible. But I just think it's not a criteria that's even really useful for gauging because it's basically where it comes from is from the Dupont-Aigny's failed attempt to try and do a handshake classification. And we've got a much better way of doing handshake classification, which doesn't involve the tip shapes at all.
Yeah.
So I used to teach this material and, quite religiously, oh, this is very important. It's part of the doctrine. We've got to teach it. And then it's just fucking rubbish. It's like, and it's like, there's just not enough variations to see it. So most people's fingertips are rounded, you know,
Yeah.
and yeah, if you saw someone with really splayed fingertips, you'd notice it. It obvious, but I've never encountered those people. So without the experience, you don't have a means of verifying or disproving any particular theory. And then eventually you get to the point where it's not sufficiently differentiated. And my argument then goes like this: well, okay, it may be true, and in maybe certain parts of the world, that is a useful method. It's not a useful method where I'm looking because I'm not seeing the differences. One, and two, there are other bits of the hand which are much, much, much more important, which are clear and differentiated. So let's go with the things that are clearly differentiated because they're the ones that are going to give us the more reliable information. And when you take that approach, you end up with fingerprints because they're the most clear of all the things. There's no argument really about is it a whirl or a loop, as opposed to, oh, is that a square tip or a rounded tip? Oh, it's a bit sort of roundy square, it's a squarey roundy. Ugh. And then you've got to have enough examples of those to be able to verify whether their interpretation is correct. So, um, and there's all sorts of. So I just dropped them. I just, ages ago. I can't even remember when I dropped fingertips, but I dropped them because basically, they're not really providing the enough information to be able to be justified really. But it all comes from Benham, and everybody who follows Benham, they make three mistakes. They they use mounts, they overemphasize the thumb, and they overemphasize the fingertips. And they are people are wowed by this book when they really shouldn't be. It's really not a good book. I mean, in the second half of the book is rubbish. It's complete rubbish because every single thing he talks about on the lines, there are no handprints in it. It's just drawings,
Yeah. Okay. So
made
it's
up stuff
fantasy.
basically.
Okay, no, but you're right. Most of the fingertips are rounded, but it's just sometimes I just react because they are very square or very very spatulate or very like conic pointing. So then
Well,
I
if you
just
see
think,
them, if they are, then they are. But
yeah,
then you've got to say, well, what does it actually mean? And I don't know. And the reason I say I
yeah,
don't know is because
mm,
I don't see them often enough.
No,
I mean, we
okay.
can classify them elementally. So square tips are earth, pointy tips are water, spatulate tips are fire,
Yeah,
rounded tips are
yeah.
air.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what are you going to say? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a very ordered mind and you're very methodical. You might find that in accountants, square tips. Oh, you're very psychic, you're very intuitive. You might find that with someone with a pointy tip. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
if someone's ordered and methodical, you'll see it in another part of the hand. If someone's psychic or intuitive, you'll see something else in the hand that shows you that much more definitely. If
Mm-hmm.
someone's sporty, if they've got spatulate tips, they're expressive and outgoing and physically active and sporty, there'll be other things in the hand. There'll be a large mount here, be a major fire line
Yeah.
there. They'll have a fire
Yeah.
skin texture. I mean, you know, it's obvious from other features. And you've
Yeah.
got what? You've got air. Oh, you're quite airy. You know, you read books and go on computers and talk to people a lot. Is that your life in any kind of way? Yeah, isn't everybody like that? Well, actually, yes, they are. So, you know, it's not really very useful. It's like, what is the utility of that? So, I mean, you know, put it in your back pocket, but don't put it on, you know, front and center because it's
Okay. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are
But
there are more important things to be looking at in the hand, really.
yeah. Okay. So next question: the different finger segments,
Yeah,
the different when it comes to vocational
yeah.
analysis, for example. Do you cover that in any of your courses, or is that
Yeah, yeah,
do you
yeah.
have any?
I mean, I have a very specific course on vocational analysis from the hand. I mean, maybe that's what I
Okay. So
should do
so
next, and
you
maybe you should come and join me on that one.
yeah, that would
Um,
be good.
that might be a good way to do it because I
Yeah,
do.
because there is some importance of the different finger segments for sure.
Yeah, the phalanges. That's an interesting question. I've got mixed feelings about the phalanges, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the significance of the phalanges, where does that come from? Well, that comes from Deborol. So Deborol in 19th century palmist who basically has this idea of the three worlds, the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. And so because he's got that notion, he's the Kabbalistic notion, he's applied it to the hand. People who kind of follow that through have basically taken that idea from him. So there are three main lines. So the physical, the mental, and then the water line is the spiritual. So there are three areas to the hand, you know, the lower, the middle, and the upper. And then there are three areas to the phalanges, the lower, the middle, and the upper. So it's physical, mental, and spiritual. So that's where that idea comes from, and that way of looking at it. Um, I and when you come to the elemental approach, then you actually do it slightly differently. And you've got earth, water, fire, and air. So you've got water, fire, and air. So that elemental approach of putting the elements on the phalanges comes from Terry Jukes. So he put that idea on there because he was interpreting everything in terms of the elements, and he made a really rough correlation between the 19th century palmists, and I include Benham in that because Benham follows David Hall because they all do. Um, and you know, so it's Ben, they sort of the sensual, the practical, and the intellectual. So that's the water, fire, and air. Um, and I spent a lot of time, again, analysing the finger phalanges. That was a major part of Terry Jukes' approach to assessing the hand. It's another good book that I recommend you don't read.
Okay.
I've got a massive that bookshelf back there. It's a massive collection of all the books you shouldn't read. Okay, so don't waste your time. So this one is Chinese hand
Definitely.
analysis. Really don't fucking waste your time on that. Okay,
Okay, I
so
think
this,
I have
this
that somewhere.
you do have
I
it.
think, yeah.
All right. So this
So,
is this is bonkers. So this is
mm,
all about like he's even got a method of vocational analysis from the finger phalanges.
mm.
So he talks about the eight factors of total finger analysis. You know, it's just
Oh, okay,
bonkers.
okay. I
It's
haven't
absolute fucking
read it
rubbish.
very.
All of it. Um, and and it's rubbish because it overemphasizes part of the hand, which is really problematic. And it's really problematic because one of the biggest problems about assessing phalanges, particularly with a handprint, is you can't tell how the handprint's been taken.
Mm. No,
And
so
some
you need to
people are
speak.
terrible at taking handprints. There's a
Yeah.
there's a lack of consistency
Hmm.
in the way that people take handprints. So sometimes these bottom phalanges come out looking like they're really thin when they're not. And so the distortion is very easy to do on a handprint.
Yeah.
Secondly, so that's the first problem. Has the handprint been taken correctly that you can trust what you're actually looking at?
Hmm.
Secondly, you've got the problem that all the different phalanges are different sizes.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a kind of a real problem of trying to work out, okay, is that a big phalange or is that just
Mm-hmm.
big because it's bigger than everything else?
Yeah.
You know, what's
Yeah.
the, you know, once you start getting into proportional evaluation of the finger phalanges, it becomes really difficult to know whether one's bigger or not, and then becomes a matter of subjective interpretation, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
useful at all. So even if you can be clear about what the provenances are of each of the finger phalanges, it's actually
Mm-hmm.
really difficult to then assess, well, whether that's strong and that's not strong,
Yeah.
because your opinion of that is going to be colored by the fact that someone took the handprint really badly and these middle
Mm-hmm.
phalanges look really thin,
Yeah. Yeah.
or um, or even if it's correctly done, how do you evaluate whether that's a big version of that phalange when this phalange
Phalange.
here is
Yeah.
always going to be the biggest phalange? That's just by
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
And these phalanges are always going to be the smallest two phalanges. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you
No, but
how do you
you need to
how do
see
you
the live hand to make this analysis.
well, even if you see the live hand, you've got the problem that they start off as different sizes. So how
Mm-hmm.
do you proportionally relate them to each other? It
Mm-hmm.
becomes a subjective question. There's no objective evaluation in that really. You know, this will always be the smallest phalange. Always.
Yeah.
This will always be the biggest phalange. You know, so I think so what I mean, and having spent a huge amount of time analyzing finger phalanges and in the 80s developing a flawed system for doing vocational analysis from the finger phalanges. I mean, I completely dropped all of that years and years ago now, but you know, I think the only thing you can really talk about with the finger phalanges are really quite generic things like, are all these phalanges big and fat? You know,
Yeah.
yes, that person's sensuous and probably overweight and probably could do with losing a bit of weight. Are all these phalanges really well developed and these ones very wasted, or they're probably very intellectual and they probably don't take care of their health very much? So,
Mm-hmm.
and really, apart from a generic
Mm-hmm.
observation like that, I think it's very difficult to be clear about specifically what each finger phalange is associated with.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and certainly, despite my attempts to try and do that, certainly there's not sufficiently corroborated evidence to say
Mm-hmm.
everyone who's got this phalange really big, for example, is really good at languages or is really good at mathematics, or people with this phalange really strong are always architects or lawyers, or people with this phalange strong are always mystics and religious preachers. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, but that's the kind of assertions that are made in this book. You know, if you
Mm-hmm.
see that phalange long, it means that this person's good at this kind of quality. And this book is not based upon any practical experience whatsoever. The author of this book did not practice as a hand reader. The
Yeah.
system that he's created in there is entirely a fiction of his own mind.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
based upon reading hundreds and hundreds of pairs of hands. So it's theoretical bullshit, and it doesn't stand the test of time because of that. So
Mm-hmm.
so there's a real problem with finger phalanges. I mean, I think
Yeah. I see.
lineation on the phalanges is interesting. I think, you know, if you see stress levels, anxiety levels, particularly on the top phalanges, you can see
Yeah.
hormonal imbalances by lineation on the top phalanges. But I really
Yeah.
don't play a lot of store by the the size of the finger phalanges. I mean, do you? I mean, is that something that you particularly look at, or is that something
No,
you're
but
just questioning?
I just remember many years ago, I took another course with one of the students of Fritja Unger, and she had a whole course, a vocational analysis course, just with different finger segments.
Okay.
So, but
All right. All right. Well, then she's copied that from Terry Jukes. Terry Jukes is the only person
probably,
who does that. No, no, no.
okay,
No question at all.
yeah, okay,
The Unger
yeah,
School is it's what they call them in they're like the Borg in Star Trek. I don't know if you know who the Borg were in Star Trek, but they assimilate and
yeah,
you know, they just incorporate everything into their system, and that's what they do. That's where they've got that idea from, and there's no one else in the
yeah,
world who does that. I mean, and Terry Jukes invented that approach. It didn't exist before he did it, and he got
yeah,
very sophisticated in his analysis of that. I mean,
okay,
the when you're looking at vocation analysis, hand shape, skin texture, and fingerprints.
yeah, yeah, that's the best indicators.
And
No,
then you
but I
look at
totally agree.
other things that can give you clues as to people's orientations or specific abilities, you know, like
Yeah,
um, you know, so you look at what the motivations are. So again, that's the key thing.
hmm,
What's someone's motivation?
hmm,
Why do they do what they do? Don't look at what they do. Why do they do what they do? you know.
Mhm.
So why is this lawyer so concerned to reconcile these different tribes so they can work together? Oh, because she's got double loops. So she
Mhm.
sees both sides of the argument. She wants peace. She wants to kind of bridge the difference. She's a natural mediator, arbitrator, and negotiator. So that's natural for her to want to do that. So that's pleasing to her. She's got an air skin texture, so she wants to do that in a
Yeah.
communicative way, and she's really good at listening. And how does she do that? Oh, she's got a very straight airline, so she's very logical, systematic, organized, that kind of thinking that would is obviously clearly
Mhm.
forensically and legally based would be very useful.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what's her motivation? Her motivation is to organize the world, listen, and create a reconciliation of opposites. What kind of job would do that? Oh, well, being a lawyer would be a great job to do that, So like but those that they come from the motivation. So we have to look at what the motivating drives are,
Mhm.
not the we need to see the causes, not just look at the effects. And
Yeah.
what most palmists do is they look at the effects and say, "Oh, I've seen lots of those patterns in that kind of person. Therefore,
Mhm.
I mean, Johnny does that. He says, "Oh, you see lots of radio loops on carers. Therefore, it's the carers loop." It's like, it means you're a carer. No, it
Yeah.
doesn't. It means that caring is one of your options about what you might do, and you may well be a very good counselor. It's not the counseling loop or the carers loop. That's looking at the effect and then aligning the manifestation with the effect when actually what we've got in the hand is not the manifest effect, but the
Mhm.
impulse, the causal drive that was within that person that's seeking an expression in that life, and it could manifest in lots of different ways. And so that relationship between cause and effect is the nexus of hand reading.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So another thing, I was watching the presentation of Felicity in your previous conference on November 2024, where she was talking about the upper